Yes, let's look at the process for the formation of the New Testament canon. After Jesus' ascension into heaven, the good news about him were preached orally, what we regard as apostolic period between 33 AD to 64 AD. And during that time, the gospel was majorly done orally because Jesus had told them he will soon come back to take them. And they were like following the command of Jesus, since he had told them to go and preach the message to the entire world. When you look at the oral gospel, it acquired a permanent formation from the Kenigma, which we talked about when we were introducing the paper. We talked of Kenigma, that is oral transmission of the message. So Kenigma was later used by the gospel writer like Mark and John to get their document in writing. When you look at Mark and John, this is one person because John is known as John Mark. And the first gospel to be written down, it was the Gospel of Mark, which was written by John Mark at around 64 AD. Because Mark, or John Mark, was the beloved disciple of Jesus Christ, and he had the original information about Jesus Christ. So he had to sit down and write the information about Jesus Christ. That's why the endings of John are in different form compared to the other writers like Matthew and Luke. He has a lot of endings, ending in bits. More to that, Mark also used the Kenigma as a source of information to write down the gospel. Since each and every information originated from the Kenigma, so they could use it as a source of getting the facts, getting the news about Christ, which could be helped in written form, or putting them in written form for the preservation of the near future. More to that, Mark also got information from Peter, whom he had worked for as an interpreter. Peter was a disciple of Jesus Christ, and he was the head of all the disciples of Jesus Christ. He had clear and good information about Jesus Christ, because what we said that Jesus left his keys with Peter, whereby he commanded him to look after his flocks, he commanded him to look after his sheep. So he had a good information about Jesus Christ, much as he had a literal face, but Christ, he got that information from Jesus, and even interaction with Jesus Christ was much better to help other people who are ready to put the gospel into writing. Then we also look at the second book to be written was the book of Matthew. Also Matthew, who was the disciple, who was known as the Levi, and he was a tax collector because he was a chief. And he wrote his gospel around 70 AD. When we look at Matthew's writing, he used the Mark as a source. That's why there is a lot of similarity between the Gospel of Matthew and the Gospel of Mark. Because that kind of source which which Matthew used, he got it from the Mark's source, which we refer as the Q's source of information, which was more of perpendicular to him alone. And the third gospel to be written down was the Gospel of Luke, which was written by Luke himself. That was around 8 AD. When you look at Luke's Gospel, Luke merchants, he used some of the information, but from Mark, it was a bit little, not compared to Matthew and Mark. Matthew has got a bit of information from Mark. Merchants, Mark was helped by many people, like Paul also helped him, but the source of information is the same, which he used. Then when you look at the three Gospels, we normally call them synoptic gospel because they have the similarities in the information, yet they are different. And also arranging of these books are quite different, much as there are kind of the similarities in getting the information from the three people. Here we look at what contains this one are the same information, because all of them, they copied from Mark, and they could use some bit of different words to make it different. Then the first gospel to be written down, it was the Gospel of John, whereby it was written by John himself, the beloved disciple of Jesus Christ. That was around 80 AD. And when you look at John's information, still you find that John also used the Kenigma source of information, whereby he got it and he was able to put everything in written form. So the whole summary of it rotates around, and you find that all these kind of sources of information which they used first and foremost was from the Kenigma source of information. Then other writers like Matthew and Luke, they copied from Mark. With those few, thank you for listening to me.